whatever time you are listening to us, welcome to Wait, What? Sports.
See, doesn't that feel good? I love, it's so much fun to do it.
Well, and, today we're talking about the Masters.
Right.
So I'm a little bit calmer about it because as you experienced watching the Masters for the first time yesterday with me, Gina was like, this is like sports music I've never heard before. It's so calming.
It's like listening to orchestral music. It's like, I don't even know how it goes, but it was just like the calmest. I was like, this is the least hype music for a sport I've ever heard.
So the Augusta National actually has their own trademark copyrighted song.
I saw that on YouTube, and I was tripping out.
And yes, it sounds like a bubbling brook.
It really does. It really does. Like, I feel like that's the music you go to sleep on, or you meditate. You go, you do your like ums too.
Yeah, but I mean, it kind of fits the sport.
It does.
Golf is not full contact.
It is not. And music does set the mood. I will say that. This is true. Although it did have some like music that was kind of triumphant, like I was like, oh, there we go.
But yeah, when they're showing the leaderboards, they're like pumping you up a little bit.
Right.
But so this weekend,
you forgot to introduce us.
Oh, sorry. Oh my gosh.
I know it's your first time doing it, so I'm gonna let that slide. Go ahead.
And I was so excited about the Masters that I completely forgot about everything.
I got you covered. It's all good. Go for it.
So I am Amy, and next to me is, of course, Miss Gina.
Hello.
And over on the board is Dr. Robinson.
Eli, Dr. Robinson.
Hello, everyone.
He's so happy with that name. I keep saying it, but the smile that comes across his face.
Have you told his mom yet that he has
Good
a doctor?
God, no. He gives her enough grief. I'm not going to do that to her.
Mama always wanted me to be a doctor.
I don't know. She was a nurse, so maybe not.
Just whatever you do, don't tell his sister because she will just, run
Oh, that
it.
should be the person I do tell.
Yeah, don't do that.
As an older sister, she will just take it and run with it. Trust me.
So, Eli, just stay on my good side, man. I'm telling you. Earn as many brownie points as you can. Okay, back on topic.
Yes.
Where's our bell? Ding, ding.
I forgot. I actually have one, and I forgot to bring it with me today.
Oh,
so many things going on.
Yes.
So,
all right, back on
anyways,
topic.
The Masters was this weekend, and the weather down there was crazy.
It was like weather up here.
Well, they went through like 3 days of like windy, rainy, icky, and then yesterday it dried out, but it was like 40 degrees. And today it's 75 and sunny.
See, this is what I'm talking about. This weather is bipolar. I don't understand it. Glad it's not just Northeast Ohio, though. That makes me feel a little bit better.
So that was one thing that was just like and having lived in Georgia, these people are not used to the weather down there being that cold.
They're probably freezing to death.
Well, if you looked at the crowd, everybody had like hoodies and blankets. It looked like a Browns game.
It did. Like this one lady was like, all I saw was glasses. She had on her hood and pulled the cord and it was all cinched around her face. I was like, I literally told Amy, if it was 40 degrees and that was here, people would be busting out the sandals and the shorts. And I saw that yesterday when I went to Target.
So, just a few notes about who was there and who wasn't.
Yes, because kind of a big deal. I was very shocked.
So, as we had mentioned in a previous show, the different rounds of the Masters that happen. So, they actually start playing the 4 rounds on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
On Thursday and Friday, or on Thursday, after Thursday, you make the cut. Okay?
Right.
So, they start off with, 150 golfers.
That's a lot of people.
So by the end of Friday, they've actually cut it down to only the top 50 to 55.
Yeah.
And it's all based on score. So a couple of years ago, the qualifying rounds, and I view the qualifying rounds, the first 2 rounds, as kind of like when you are watching Olympic swimming.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got those qualifier swims.
Right.
And most of the time, the people in those qualifying rounds of swimming are like, I just have to be faster than the people in front of me. I have to be faster than the rest of the people in my pool right now.
Right.
I don't have to be faster than everybody. I just have to beat this round.
Right.
But then you always wind up with that one guy in the one heat
The overachiever.
that's like, I'm going to break a world record.
Mm-mm.
Okay?
The overachiever be like, dude, calm down.
So that's kind of how this is. I mean, if you're playing a good game, you don't want to keep yourself from playing a good game.
Facts.
But a couple of years ago, they had really low qualifying rounds. And so, like, some of the best golfers in the world didn't get in at all.
Wow.
Because of how low the scores were. This year, the scores were actually a bit higher. But we still are missing a few really notable golfers. Mm-hmm. So Bruce Koepka wasn't in there.
And I was really sad because I was like, I've never, like, we used him as an example so much on the first show. I was like, I can't wait to see this guy in action. He disappointed me. I hope you hear that, Bruce Koepka. Get your game together.
Bryson DeChambeau wasn't there either, and he's another one who's built like Koepka. Neither one of them were there. Jordan Spieth didn't make the cut. And these are all people who were together. They were all in those qualifying rounds. It's not like a year or so ago where you had Koepka wasn't even playing the Masters because he was injured, or when Tiger didn't play because he was injured. Mm-hmm. Although, speaking of Tiger, he is playing.
Yes.
He's not going to win.
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody expected him to.
He's playing a fairly good game for the fact that he's essentially playing it on one leg.
That just trips me out. Like, I get a cramp in my leg, and I feel like I'm down for the count. Charlie Hortz, I'm dying.
I mean, I've been with you for that, and it's kind of true. But, you know, he's always been that guy that will play through anything.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when you think about that with, like, football players a lot, where you expect those players to, like, play through. You're like, oh, the bone's sticking out of his leg. It's not that bad. He'll play the next one.
Just wrap some tape around that bad boy.
But you don't think of golfers
No.
as being, like, the guy that's going to be, like, standing there stoically, silently, you know, I'm going to make my way through this.
True.
But that is Tiger. And he's always kind of been that way.
Even just to see him walking yesterday. Like, he had some moments, like, you and I were like, he's limping. But then he would just be like, Chew, I got this. And just start walking, like, trying to walk normal again.
Right. And, I mean, honestly, because of all of his back surgeries and all of the physical therapy he's gone through before this injury.
Yeah.
I think that has helped him out a lot because of posture and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something you don't think about until that is an issue for you. But when you're limping, it actually throws your back and everything else out of whack. And so he probably was limping, and then he went, oh, my God, my back's going to kill me if I don't stand up straight.
Right.
And so, you know, but you could see it in his face that, you know, even as he went to tee off yesterday at the first hole, I was like, he looks tired. And Augusta is like a giant test for somebody who can't really walk right now. Augusta National is a very, very hilly course, as you were noting when we were watching.
I was very surprised.
So for somebody who was told that they may never walk again, to take on that course as their first time back to tournament play.
It's just crazy.
I think he's testing himself. I'm thinking this is my thought on it. If I was Tiger, I'd be like, okay, this course traditionally loves me and loves my style of play. Mm-hmm. But it's also going to be one of the harder courses for me to actually walk. If I can do the Masters, I can do X tournament, Y tournament, Z tournament.
So this is kind of like his benchmark.
That's what I'm thinking in his head. He's like, if I can make it through this and not have any major repercussions afterwards, because he may not see it while he's playing.
But once he gets home or whatever.
A week from now, he might not be able to get out of bed for a day or two.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that was one of his thing. But, you know, I love watching it. His tee time this morning was at like 10:40.
Oh, wow.
Which meant it was a very early tee time.
Yes.
He was in one of the earlier groupings. But the leader yesterday, at the end of the day, was at like 11 under par. So, right. You know, Tiger was above par. I think he was only like 3 or 4 shots above.
I think 3 above.
But when your leader is so far under,
right? Well, yeah, the next closest person was what, like 7 under par or something like that. I was like, can anybody catch this guy?
Well, we'll see. I mean, we're recording this now while they're still playing.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see what happens and who actually wins.
Yeah, because there's a lot of like back and forth, especially with second and third place. Just
So
we'll update you guys on our social media once we have an actual Masters champion.
So that was some of the notables that aren't there, and one really big notable that you've probably heard about that is there.
Right.
I know as we were watching, we were writing down different questions that you had.
Yes,
so
and
that we can answer some of
these
these
like a whole page of questions. Look at Eli's face. Look at Dr. Robinson. He's like, Lord have mercy. I'm so sorry, Amy.
Dr. Robinson, do you know all these golf things?
Well, I'm not really familiar with the game, but I do know some golf terms. Okay. But what I saw in the video yesterday.
The one I posted online? Don't laugh at me.
Rude. Posted online today. Oh, is that the hole?
I couldn't tell.
So,
I was like, he got there quick.
The real video that
it's on Facebook
that Gina posted on Facebook. She was recording just shortly after she got to my house, so we hadn't had a chance for her to even like really watch. It was like literally the first thing she did. And you know, the golfer, I don't even remember who it was.
Tiger.
Was it Tiger?
It was Tiger.
Had hit the ball and it landed near a divot. And she didn't realize what the fairway compared to the green, you know, looked like at that point. And so she was like, ooh, there's a hole in the ground there. Not realizing it was a divot and not the actual hole.
Right.
Because she
it's a beginner's mistake. Golly.
Nah, I just thought it was so hilarious.
This guy.
I mean, it was like a 1 second video. 1 minute video. Oh, is that the hole?
Well, and the thing is that, like, she says that, and I shake my head. I didn't say anything. I just shook my head, and she goes, oh, I thought maybe he had gotten really close all of a sudden.
Yeah, I did. I was real disappointed. I was like, oh, here I was thinking I knew something.
So.
And then it was one incident said, why are they so quiet? Or why is that? She said something along the lines like, oh, why are they so clapping? Why are they clapping? You know?
I made a lot of comments yesterday, I'm not going to lie. A lot of questions, a lot of comments.
There was a lot going on in that living room yesterday watching.
Yeah.
So, and we were watching part of the coverage. What we were watching when she first came over was actually the live stream that was on Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
And then at 3:00 we switched over to the CBS coverage.
Which I have to say was way more entertaining. So I can agree with that. Jim Nantz is way more entertaining.
So the live stream announcers don't say as much.
Nope. They don't explain as much.
The hot mics are way hotter.
I heard so much talk. I was like, they talk that much on a golf course? Like, this is crazy.
So much hotter. And this morning I tuned in for a little bit before the live stream started having some issues on me. And, you know, one of the golfers, I didn't even, you know, again, didn't catch the name. He you know, hit his tee shot, and literally as the ball landed, all you heard was, no, no, no.
Somebody must have had some money on that hole or something.
Was this the golfer or
so the announcers? I thought maybe it was somebody from the crowd.
Yeah.
Even though the crowds aren't that big at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And the announcers are like, even he can't believe that his ball landed that far to the left. and they went back and they showed the shot. Like when they came back from commercial, they showed him, like the camera view of him after he hit.
That had to be hilarious.
And this is what I like. Part of me agreed with the announcers, and part of me were like, yeah, see, Jim Nantz would never say this. They were like, I could just watch this over and over again.
Oh, that's not cool.
I was like, that's mean.
Not cool.
But yeah, he was very animated about his no and his like hands going up in the air, and he was bent over, and he was, yeah, it was like.
He was probably like, oh.
Yeah, like basically, I can't believe, like, that's not how I hit that ball.
Yeah, that struck me, like how animated the golfers are, like whether they hit a good shot or they like have a terrible like shot, how loud the crowd is, like just the people going, yes, 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 get in that hole. I was like, whoa, calm down. This is supposed to be like everybody's quiet. Yeah, like you know how like poetry, you snap your fingers, like
Yes, the golf clap.
the golf clap, the poetry snap. I was like, wow, no, people are like rowdy.
So people can get really rowdy, but they also have signs and things. So like when it needs to be quiet in the gallery, they have to quiet down.
Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, they will get pulled.
Yeah, hold up a sign that says "Quiet, please."
Right. And otherwise they will get pulled. If they're if they've had a few too many rounds at the 19th hole, they may get themselves pulled out of the gallery.
I'm surprised that's not. They have so many staunch rules at the Masters. I'm surprised that's not a rule. No drinking on the fairway.
It's generally not beer.
Oh, it's wine and champagne.
Yes.
Yeah, champagne.
It is. It is wine. It is wine coolers. It is occasionally a mixed drink. I mean, honestly, I'm going to say most people probably just have an Arnold Palmer or a spiked Arnold Palmer.
Or a Bloody Mary, you know.
Right.
The high class drinks,
Something that doesn't look like
alcohol, right? Just walking around with a 40.
I don't know what kind of golf courses you go around, Gina.
I live near Washington Park, for those of you who don't know, in Cleveland. That's Fleet. That's the mixture hood where the white and black people are. Not just the white people. It's not. We all come together, and that's the hood right there.
So, what we hadn't really laid out how we're gonna do this, but however you want to do questions or whatever.
Okay. Well, we kind of touched on the weather, but that's a good way to start because it affects not only the ground condition, but also, which I didn't know, the clubs. So one of the first questions was, why is it such a big deal that it's so cold in comparison to how it usually is there, and why was it affecting people so bad?
Right. So first off, if you're cold and you're standing outside,
right,
which for all intents and purposes, golfers are basically standing outside for most of their game. They're not, running around expending lots of energy. You're going to be colder. I mean, and it affects different people differently because, as we talk all the time, I am always warm and you are always cold. But as you know, on a 40-degree day, I can go for a walk and I can start with a long sleeve shirt and maybe a t-shirt on underneath, or maybe just a t-shirt and a tank top. Mm-hmm. By the time I'm 20 minutes in, if it's a good paced exercise based walk,
right,
I've lost a layer already because I've gotten too hot.
Right.
But not everybody's like that.
Yeah, because I will not come out of a layer.
And so you saw that in the golfers and what they were wearing. A lot of them had. Tiger had a sweater on. You almost never see Tiger with a sweater on. Mm-hmm. A lot of them had multiple layers on, or beanie hats, or
because that's what stuck out to me first. I was like, why does he have on like a beanie Carhartt? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, Kessner had that was the gentleman playing in the pair with Tiger.
Yeah,
he had his a beanie cap on because he was cold.
And that's crazy. Like, I guess you just don't think if it's cold, they just won't play. But that can't happen at the Masters.
Well, I'm certain if it was snowing, they would stop. But yeah, it was 48 degrees and a 20-mile-per-hour wind. Mm-hmm. And as those of us up here in Northeast Ohio know, that's quite a wind chill.
Yeah.
So a lot of the golfers were keeping their hands in their pockets and all of that.
Was it Scheffler who kept coming in and out of his vest every time he went up to drive or putt or whatever?
Right. So, yeah, Scheffler had a nice, warm, insulated vest that he had on, along with his long sleeves and everything else.
Yeah.
So he would go up, he would take off his vest, hand it to his caddy, walk up, make his shot, come back, put his vest on.
Took that bad boy right on up to the throat.
So, but then, as you were saying, it affects not just the players, not just the fact that it was cold and the crowd was cold, but it does affect the equipment.
Which is trippy to me. Like, it makes sense once you explained it, but I was like, I would have never thought.
So I didn't know how badly it affected.
Mhm.
I mean, I knew it had to have some sort of effect, but they were talking on the broadcast about how just the cold could take 7 feet off of your drive.
That's crazy.
Just the cold.
That's significant.
That's significant, and that didn't even counter in the fact that there was so much wind.
Right.
So
That's when aerodynamics come into play, in golf.
well, it wasn't actually because of that.
Yeah.
So the reason it takes so much off of your drive, it being just cold,
Mhm.
your golf clubs are cold.
Right.
I'm bringing science in here.
Yes.
Okay.
Physics.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Physics.
So when your golf clubs are cold, cold materials,
Mm-hmm.
the space in between the atoms get closer together, so they don't vibrate as much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they can't hold as much potential energy. On a normal golf club, most of them being some form of carbonite or something,
Right.
They've got a lot of space in between those atoms so that they can move a lot and store up a lot of potential energy. And that's what takes the momentum of the swing from turning your torso and bringing the club from over your head down to the ground
Right.
and transfers it into the ball is all that potential energy
That's being built
that's
up.
being built up in those atoms in the golf club. When it's cold and they can't move as much, not as much potential energy. So no matter how much you're turning your force of your body with the normal
won't
strength, it won't transfer correctly.
Oh.
So it literally can't hit the ball as hard.
So trippy.
Even the doctor learned something.
See?
Even the doctor.
The
doesn't
more you know.
anything.
There we go. Do, 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 do. And you thought you knew. I told you you were going to have your mind blown at something.
So that's where like the cold weather affected the clubs. But we also touched on briefly yesterday about the fact that it affects the ground conditions.
Yeah, significantly. Like, you could see it when it was, like, everybody was struggling, especially when it came to putting. Like, it didn't matter how soft or hard you hit, that ground was just not cooperating.
And again, part of it is because it's a very undulating course.
It is, yeah.
So even the putting greens have a lot of slopes and angles
Which
to
you
them.
couldn't necessarily tell by watching it on TV.
They are very subtle breaks.
Yeah.
And even the golfers can't always see them.
Mm-hmm.
This morning they were talking, and they said last week when Tiger was there playing rounds with his son and Tiger would be out on the green, and he'd go, "Oh, well, Dad, that's like, a 6-inch putt." And he's like, "At Augusta, it might as well be 3 feet."
Yeah. This is true.
Because of the way that it's all laid out.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on where that 6 inches is, it might be in a valley, you might have 2 breaks, there's so many different ways that they can mess with you.
Right.
And Augusta is notoriously hard to play. But the other thing about it was because it had rained all day on Wednesday,
Mm-hmm.
you had dried out on Thursday, and then it got cold for Friday and Saturday.
Right.
The ground being cold, the grass being cold, makes it slippery.
Right. Makes sense.
So it's kind of, as I was telling you, it's like if you go outside with a cardboard box on a hill
Mm-hmm.
and you go to push that cardboard box down the hill in the middle of summer, okay, and it's really warm out there, it's not going to be that easy to push, especially if it's dry.
Right.
It's not going to be that easy to push because it's going to catch on everything.
Mm-hmm. Friction.
Okay. If it's even just slightly wet, it's going to be a little easier. If it is cold, even dry,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be easy because the cold allows a little bit less of that friction to be there.
Right.
And to have it damp and cold really just messes it up.
Man.
So people were hitting things with a force that normally wouldn't carry a ball beyond the hole, and they were going like
Out into the crowd.
well,
I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to call them a crowd. Out into the gallery.
yes. So it was a little bit of that, and it was a little bit of like wind. So especially if you had the wind behind you, the
Yeah.
wind was so fierce it was even messing with the balls on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, the wind and the breezes don't mess with the ball on the ground.
Right.
But this wind was so fierce.
Because they would hit, and everybody would be like, good shot. Oh, there goes the ball. Start rolling. Like, oh, no. What happened? It's I was sitting there. There were so many moments when I was like, oh, my gosh. No. Good shot. Oh. y'all. Like, I got into it.
She actually really, really did.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, because I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm writing all this stuff, and then she'd be like, yeah. I was like, what happened? Because I was trying to like write down all her questions, and I wasn't necessarily paying attention to the TV.
Because Eli, if you can believe it, I was asking a lot of questions.
I can believe that.
So, so that was how the weather affected everything.
And it's crazy. It affects not only the players, it affects their equipment, it affects the ground. Like, all these perfect storms for it to just be a struggle for everybody yesterday.
And I think what you missed seeing, because it wasn't as much in the later groupings because the wind was more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
In the earlier groupings, the wind wasn't as consistent. And one thing that you might see if you're watching the streaming access is the players and the caddies picking up pieces of grass and throwing them in the air. It's to see exactly what way the wind is blowing at that moment. Because
I did not see that.
Sometimes the flags can tell you the wind's coming one way, but especially with the hills of Augusta, just like if you go out to Geauga County.
Yeah.
And the wind wraps around things, or if you're downtown Cleveland and you're walking and the wind wraps around the buildings.
True.
They pick up the leaves and they toss it to see which way everything's moving.
So basically it's almost like a wind tunnel, correct?
It's not quite a wind tunnel, but because of the hills, you're never quite certain how the wind is playing off, especially like if you're on the downside of a hill.
Yeah, like if it's coming down to the valley of the hill.
Right, and if the flag is on the downside, it's different than if the flag is on the upside of the hill, and you're just never really certain. And Augusta is one of the most tree-lined courses.
No kid. Like, I feel like there was barely any holes that didn't have trees right by it. Every time, like all the way down the fairway, surrounding the green.
Right, and again, I didn't catch which golfer it was who wound up underneath a tree, like underneath a bush. There was one that wound up like literally underneath this tiny little bush, and he was like,
"What do I do?"
Well, no, not necessarily what do I do, but he just walked up and he looked at it and he was like, "I'm literally in the middle of this bush." It was a tiny bush, and it was like literally like the ball was being held by the bush.
Yeah.
Off the ground. So like, you know, they have to get the rules people over to decide how far he can move the ball and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then later on,
Scheffler, I think it was
Scheffler at the end, I think it was the 18th hole.
It was the 18th hole.
He wound up in a thicket.
I mean, he was in there. Like, the cameras had to go back. They were searching through the bushes and moving stuff around.
The entire time from him walking from the tee to that point, course officials were already looking for the ball, and they didn't find it until he got down there.
Yeah.
So,
because what did you tell me? Like, if they couldn't have found it before he got there,
they had like 3 minutes to find it once he gets there.
Okay.
So they found it, and it was like there was no way to hit it. Mm-hmm. It was nestled in this area of roots and things.
Yeah.
And there was just no way to get to it because, like, the only place he could have stood and hit it, he would have been hitting
the trees.
He would have been hitting away from the course. And you never want to hit away from the course.
Oh, he would have hit. Okay.
Yeah.
Out away from him.
And that would have been the only real way that he could have. So anything that he could have hit, and even then, it would have been like a chip shot or a putt rather than any kind of real shot.
Right. Like a drive.
Right. And it would have been just such a short swing. It wouldn't have gotten very far, and all of that. So, you know, all the debate, they actually, let his partner play his next couple of shots while they were figuring out how to move it and everything else. And then all the rules about actually having to drop the ball and like how many times you have to attempt to drop the ball and have it not roll away before you get a chance to just place the ball.
There's so much that goes into those decisions. It's crazy. I was like,
well, and by the time they was done, they had 2 different rules officials over there.
Yeah,
that
I noticed
talking
that.
about it. And it's very rare to have more than one rules official decide what needs to be done.
Right.
And that's where this is something completely unusual.
That never ever happens practically.
So, that was another one of those weird things.
That was one heck of a way to wrap up the day, because they were the last pairing, right?
Mm-hmm. So, which goes back to one of your original questions of the day, which was, what is a pairing?
Yeah, because I was so confused. Again, golf in my head is an individual sport. Each player just plays on through one after the other. But I did not know that they went out together, like 2 at a time, or 3 at a time, depending on what round they're in.
Right. So it's either a pairing or a grouping.
Right.
And in a traditional tournament, it's usually just the 2.
Mm-hmm.
As I said in the previous show, we'll eventually talk about tournaments where you're playing as a team or you're playing partners, which is always trippy because, like, you think of partners as being like a tennis thing and not a golf thing.
Exactly.
But
I can't wait to get that one.
But the pairing is, those 2 people that go out. And do you remember how they decide?
Yes,
who's going
they
together?
go in order of whoever, like the 2 best ones are playing together, and then they just go in order of how everybody's score is, which honestly, in the world of sports, is the most logical thing that I've ever heard, because usually there's some random algorithm for how they decide who plays who,
or it's always like the last team and the first team, and I'm like,
why?
Doesn't that just mean you want everybody that's at the bottom to lose out?
Exactly. Like, I was like, when you told me,
at
it was
that point,
like,
why don't you just like let number 1 and number 2 play for the Super Bowl without any playoffs?
Exactly. Like, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Why doesn't every sport just let the 2 best go against each other, then 3 and 4, then 5 and 6, then 7 and 8, and on down? Golf seems complicated, but they probably have the most simple stuff compared to like all the other major sports.
They have some very nuanced rules.
Yeah.
But their stats and things are very simple.
They really are.
And do you remember how they decide the order that the pairings are going out?
I think the better you score, the later you start in the day. Like, so Tiger starting at 10 a.m. means his scores up to, and I didn't ask you this yesterday. Is it based off of that previous round or where you are completely for the tournament?
Where you are for the tournament.
Okay, so if your score is high, which means you're not doing very good, you start early in the day. If your score is low, then you start in one of the later pairings.
Mm-hmm.
I got it. I feel so smart.
I love that you're learning, Gina.
Me too. Knowledge is power.
So, what question would you like to go over next?
Well, I think we transitioned really good into when we were talking about the stats. So the scoring, as far as like when I was watching it on TV with you yesterday, like they showed it on TV, but then they were showing the symbols around like how many shots it took you to get to make it in the hole. So I was like, what do all these symbols mean? Like, why do they have all these?
Right. So if you watch on the box score that they show, the very top line is the hole number.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Not the place that the person is in. Because I thought that was like, see, in 11th place? No, the 11th hole. Got it.
So if you're looking at the box score at the bottom of the screen after he's put the ball in the hole, they will have each hole number. That's the top line. And it's usually smaller, and some people overlook it, and they don't realize like what they're looking at.
Right.
The next line is what the par number should be.
Gotcha.
So that tells you, again, par is the number of shots it should take
to get it a hole in one.
To get to the hole.
Not a hole in one, but to the hole, yes.
And
I'm going to be quiet now. Go ahead.
Well, I looked over at Eli to see if he had a response to that, and he just didn't this time.
He doesn't look at me.
He's too engrossed in his phone. So anyway.
It's probably a good thing.
So that second line is the par for each of the holes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The third line is how many shots it took for them to get to the hole.
Right.
For that individual golfer. And so any hole they haven't completed yet will be blank.
Right.
And any hole they have will have a number in there. If they've made par,
which means they got it in the number of shots expected,
it will be just the number.
Got it.
If they have birdied, it will be a circle.
Got it. Surrounding the number.
Okay. If they got an eagle, which again is the 2 shots down, it's 2 circles around.
Which makes perfect sense.
If you bogey,
Oh, another one. It's a square.
It is a square.
And if you double bogey, it's a double square. And if you triple bogey, which somebody actually had it on their score ticket yesterday, is a triple square. Yes.
You know what? I'm gonna do the Ace Ventura. Really?
Yes, really. I that was me. I said that.
She's been studying, Eli.
I have. Look, Amy wouldn't let me not use the actual terms yesterday, so I was practicing the terminology as well as watching.
The doctor is proud of you.
Oh, thanks. I get a clean bill of health, huh?
So, those are what you're looking for in that longer box score at the bottom of the screen.
Right.
Now, when a golfer steps up to the tee for each hole, up in the right-hand corner of the screen, there's a little box that pops up that has his last name.
Yes.
It usually has some random number, okay? The tournaments ascribe each player a number at the beginning of the tournament, and that's how they figure out the first round placements and the groupings for that first round because you haven't played yet.
Makes sense.
That number at the Masters also goes on your caddy's uniform, which we will also talk about.
Yes. I can't wait to get to that part.
Then up in that box, they will usually tell you what hole they're on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it will say 11th.
Yes. Which, again, is not the place they're in. That's the hole they're at.
And then it will tell you the par for that hole. And it may, if they're at the tee box, tell you how many yards it is to the hole.
Right.
Okay. If it pops up while the golfer is on his fairway shots or, on the putting green, that box will also tell you how many shots they've taken so far on this hole. Because especially later in the day, they start bouncing around.
Yeah, they do.
So that you're not following any one golfer or any one set. Because all of those players are all playing at the same time.
Yeah, and that tripped me out. Because, again, in my head, I'm like, golf takes all day because you literally have, one person golfing. They do all 18. Then the next one comes out, and they do all 18. I was like, they were bouncing around so much. Because I was like, there was one, I can't remember who it was, the last year's winner. Whoever was playing against
Schwartzel.
Schwartzel, yeah. Schwartzy! I nicknamed him. His name is Schwartz or Schwartzy.
Don't do that.
His name was fun to say. Let me live my life.
Schwartzel.
He hit a shot. It ended up on, either to the side or almost on the same green as the people ahead of him. I was like, man, they really are, right behind each other. That's crazy.
Right. And honestly, in the first couple of rounds, you can have... and it happens even in the later rounds to some extent, depending on how fast people are playing.
Yeah.
But if you finish up and the grouping ahead of you has not yet made it to the green, you wait at the tee box until they make it to the green.
Oh, wow.
The group in front of you has to be at least at the green.
Makes sense.
Because you don't want to tee off and accidentally hit somebody in the group in front of you that's standing in the middle of the fairway.
It's not funny, but...
When you hear 4, you better get out the way.
On a local course, that is what 4 means. It means I am playing and I see you. You keep your eye out for my ball.
Right.
Okay?
Which is funny. You know what? I'm glad you said that, doctor, because I never heard anybody say that. And I guess it's just expected that doesn't happen in the professionals.
You don't do that in professionals because the course officials will tell you when to tee.
Got it. Okay. And I'm so glad I didn't even think about it. Nobody said 4. And that's, again, when you hear people think of golf, all you hear is 4.
Right. I do remember hearing it once, actually, at the first tee when the announcer was making his announcements of, who was coming up to tee next.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, 4, please. And I was like, why are you saying 4? You're supposed to be saying quiet. I was so confused. But what you have to realize is that a lot of times, the course announcer is just a high-ranking official from the home course.
Right.
He's a high-ranking member at the Augusta Nationals.
Mm-hmm.
He's not, some guy who professionally does these announcements.
Exactly.
So especially not on the first, second, third day. You can sometimes on the fourth day I've actually recognized the voice of the announcer every so often, but I don't know if that just means that person happens to be a really high-ranking member, or
he just got the honor of doing it,
right? Or if they invited him to do it or something like that,
right?
But yeah, you don't. They have officials that tell you like stop,
right,
and go.
Yeah, but the bouncing around, like they were like, okay, hole 14, hole 18, hole 12, hole 4,
right? So the start times are only 10 to 15 minutes apart.
Yeah, I saw that yesterday when we were looking up stuff. Okay.
So start time, your first start time might be at 10, and then your second start time is going to be 10:15.
Which makes sense, because if you got to get through that many people we'll talk about the lighting part in a second, but before it gets dark outside, like, you got to keep them moving. So that makes perfect sense. But yeah, I was very surprised by like, we were all over the place. We're following this golfer, then this golf. I was like, where am I right now? I had to slow down and like pay attention, because golf is one of those games where you do have to pay attention.
Yeah, if you really are looking and wanting to like follow it,
yeah,
you do. Like I said, personally for me, it's a great thing to have like
in the background,
because I can always look up and kind of catch up on what's happening.
Right.
It's not like the football game where if you miss the tackle, you've missed the tackle,
unless they just happen to play a replay.
Right. And so, you can kind of, gather what's going on, because it does move on a slower pace.
Right.
But yeah, everybody's playing all at the same time. And so and they do play all 18 holes every day. Yeah,
that was the other part. Because, okay, again, here I was thinking like traditional tournament play, or like baseball, for example, if they get rained out or something like that. I thought that let's say you get through the first 9 holes, and then they're like, okay, you're done for the day for whatever reason. Like, we got to get to this next set of golfers or whatever. I did not realize for 4 days straight, you have to not only play, but walk that whole golf course 4 times.
And that's why Gina was like completely floored by Tiger.
Yeah, he just blew my mind even more, because I was like, how? I would probably be done on the first day. I'd be like, I got to do this 3 more times and still compete, like be at this level of excellence practically for 2 whole days. Because, like you said, the first 2 are kind of like a give me. But then the second 2, Saturday and Sunday, like your A game is on the whole time.
Right. And you still have to, like, those first 2 days, you still have to play hard, but you don't necessarily have to, like, beat yourself up for it.
Exactly.
But.
Or play through whatever you may have gone through the first.
Right. So, I mean, that was the other thing, is that, like, not only. And that's why they bounce around, is because everybody's playing all 18 holes.
Yeah.
And once you get to the last groups being out on the holes, there's so many people out there. Mm-hmm. There's a full, 18 pairs.
That is so crazy. And I told Amy, I was like, there's so many people. Like, again, in my head, I'm thinking golf is like these little small crowds of folks. No, it was people everywhere. And I was just, the whole, like, fanfare of it, just, I wasn't ready.
Well, and you could see, like, the crowds build throughout the day. Because
Absolutely.
As we started watching, there were certain holes that I was like, I am so surprised that their stands aren't filled, because I've never watched I've never watched the early holes and the early rounds, the pre-national televised stuff, because I didn't have access to it before. Mm-hmm. Usually it's shown on like Golf Channel or something like that.
Right.
This year, they gave the contract to CBS to be able to show the early rounds.
Yeah, Paramount Plus.
And so, like, I'd never seen that before, and I was like, I can't believe all these seats are empty. But as the day went on, they all filled up.
Like, it looked like it was standing room only, especially, like, at the ones that had the bleachers, like the stadium seating. Like, there was not an empty space in there at all.
No, not at all. So, we should go back to the caddies.
Okay, yes, because these caddies. I was like, when I first walked into your house, I saw the guys on the course in the white jumpsuits. And I was like, they just must be, like, the land people, like the groundskeepers. If you had told me they were the caddies before I walked in that door, I'd been like, no, they're not. They were just like mechanics. Like, they literally, like, they were just grease monkeys. And then you were like, oh, they're caddies. I was like, why are they dressed like that? Again, usually when you think of a caddy, they just have like a bib on and they have the clubs and they might be able to wear shorts or something. But I didn't know that it was so like staunch and traditional to do it that way, especially at Augusta.
The Augusta Nationals has a dress code for everybody.
That is crazy.
Okay, there is a dress code for everybody. The golfers, up until I think it was the 80s, had a dress code that they could not break. They still have a dress code. It's just not as stiff.
Right.
Okay.
Not as
strict. And they don't have to wear certain colors and things like that.
So it was that they had to wear certain colors and all that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know it went that deep.
Yeah. It was a very, very strict dress code even for the golfers.
Crazy.
The caddy uniform is a very traditional uniform. It is the uniform that was decided upon by Bobby Jones, the guy who created the National, the guy who bought the land and had the idea and everything else. And it is still required that your caddy wear it. Up until the 80s, actually, and Augusta National was the last of the tournaments to change this rule. The golfers couldn't have their own caddies with them. They had to use caddies provided by the tournament by Augusta National. So Augusta National's caddies on staff would staff be caddies for the golfers up until the 1980s. And so it was just, this was always the uniform. And when they changed that rule that you didn't have to use the staff caddies,
right?
They decided to keep the uniform. So, yes, when you tune in and you're like, wait a second, isn't that the dude from Love Bug, walking around behind Tiger with his Cubs? Like,
right. I was like, so is it just some random dude carrying his cup? I
really wish I could remember that actor's name, because all I can remember is that he was like the guy from the Love Bug that was the mechanic, and then he also played Scuttle in The Little Mermaid, and I can't remember his name. But when you're sitting there and you're like, oh my god, like what are these like mechanics doing all over? Although I gotta say, they are the most pristine mechanics uniforms you've ever
feel
seen.
like if you get anything on that uniform, you will get kicked off that course. Like those were the most. I can barely keep a white T-shirt clean when I wear it. So for them to be walking around, like getting sweaty, carrying clubs, picking up dirt, getting in the weeds, like those bad boys must have been like super Scotch guarded. I don't know. Don't laugh at me. You know I'm sloppy. I can't.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Dr. Eli and his reactions to us and our ridiculousness.
Speaking of the caddies, though, like I can't, going back to the point you had made, because that tripped me out too yesterday, that they couldn't use knowing the importance and seeing the importance of the caddies. Like those golfers are like constantly in communication. They're talking, they're picking their brains. The caddies are giving them like, well, if you hit it with this, if you do that. Like I almost feel like the golfers would not be able to golf with other caddies. So for them to just have changed that rule where like the person that's been with you forever, because you take your caddy with you everywhere you go, and they've been with you since you practically started professionally. You got to randomly just use some random guy that you don't know from the course. That blows my mind.
So there's a couple of things on that. First off, it wasn't unusual, and you didn't have necessarily a professional caddy that you had that relationship with as a normal thing up until about the 50s or 60s.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then when that became more of a normalized thing, it slowly died out through all of the courses and all of the tournaments.
Yeah.
Because again, it was just, that's the way things were done. When you had tournaments being played while people didn't have their own personal caddies, you expected that the caddies that were employed by the course would be the most knowledgeable about the course.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
And honestly, you can still like think that way. And I think that would really make sense that, those caddies employed by the course would know the most. But when you think about how everything works nowadays,
right,
those caddies that are with the people, with the players, and forming that relationship. That relationship of trust is so important to the way that people play nowadays.
Absolutely.
It's almost like I said, the difference between like what you think of as the traditional golfer shape and then, DeChambeau
what they look
Koepka
like now
and what they look like. And even the smaller guys don't look more in shape.
They're lean.
They're lean and muscular, or they're very, very muscular compared to what we think of as a golfer. And you pointed out yesterday there actually was one in the front of the pack that is the traditional golfer, quote, shape.
Right.
And that's Lowry,
Exactly.
The Irishman.
He's got a little bit of a belly. He doesn't look like he would be able to really play golf. Like, let's just face it. Like, you look at a person like that and you're like, they could probably hit around some holes. But, like, to be out here professionally competing with these, like, high-level athletes. But
that's what we think of as a traditional golfer,
it is,
too.
absolutely.
Compared
with the
to
plaid
the
pants.
normal days and everything. So that's kind of where, everything is overall. And so, like, all these things are changing. Those relationships are changing.
Yeah.
The way that people keep their bodies. As I said, TRX, the suspension training company, had posts about how, as ambassadors, they have some of the most highly rated golf athletic trainers.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, wait, golf gets athletic trainers?
Like, these people, because who was it? One of your friends said that golf isn't a real sport because you can drink and get better at it. But, like, now, and I'm sure at some point that was the case because, we talked about people who smoked on the golf course back in the day. Like, there's pictures of, what's his name?
Jack Nicholson.
Robert Jones, like the guy who actually created the course, was out there with a cigarette. But they train like football players do, or like basketball players.
It's gotten to a point where they've come to realize, because of how many people who didn't keep up their fitness, having massive back issues as they got older. In fact, that's what killed Robert Jones.
Really?
Bobby Jones died of complications of a spinal injury.
Wow.
Or disease, degenerative disease to the spine.
Mm-hmm.
But because of how many people had those issues and hadn't been keeping themselves up, and knowing that these issues can be caused by not keeping your core strength up and things like that.
Right.
Beyond how much that can help your game, it's more about they want to keep their health.
Exactly. Beyond sports.
And I think some of the younger guys, especially watching Tiger go through all of his back injuries and things, were like, okay, we got to keep our backs good. And Tiger, after he's come back from a lot of his back injuries, his personality has changed as well. Previously, when his father was alive and everything, he was very stoic and he barely talked to anybody on the course.
Mm-hmm.
And they've said over the last several years, after he came back from a couple of, I think it was the second or third back surgery, he's had 5.
Crazy.
He and his father had passed, and he had gotten back from rehab for his substance abuse issues. He had also gone through, and he wrote a book. He had also gone through regular therapy as well. And he came out of it being less of the I can't talk to anybody while I'm playing because I have to intimidate them guy, and more of the I probably won't talk to you during the final round, but the first 3 rounds, let's be friends.
Right.
And he, he's creating more friends on the course and everything else.
Because who was he talking about? He called him JT. So like, if me and JT are in a text, and I
Justin
was like,
Thomas.
Yeah. And the camaraderie between the players was just like interesting to watch. Like they would be, while they're waiting their turn, and just chatting and talking and laughing, and their caddies are all like chatting and talking and laughing.
10 years ago, you would have not seen Tiger involved in any of that.
That's crazy. Like just standing off to the side, like
he would be plotting strategy as
crazy.
So but again, all those things affect the way things are changing in the game.
Absolutely. You don't think of golf as an evolving sport, like a sport that every sport goes through a transition, but because you think of golf as being the static thing that never changes,
because
that's strict,
it's highly traditional.
Exactly. Thank you. That's the best way to describe it.
It's a highly traditional sport, but it slowly changes over time.
Yeah.
It does change, and things reflect the times. But we are going to put up a article about
the history
of the Nationals.
It's really fascinating. It really is.
Well, and finding out the things about going back to the caddies and their dress code,
Right.
Finding out the history of like the fact that up until the 50s, I think it was, all the caddies had to be black.
Yeah, that tripped me out because they showed a video of that about how all the
Hold on, I want to make note that was not me or Gina this time.
yes, buzz your subs, bruh. I'm gonna do that to you,
Sorry.
jerk. But anyway, I hate to say it, but it makes sense. It's the South, so it makes sense that all the caddies would have to be black because there's that hierarchy there still.
To do this. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks.
He's letting us know that we're almost at our hour.
Yes. So real quick, I do want to touch on, because we talked so much about the caddies and how anymore that your caddy is the person that sticks with you through every tournament and everything. I asked you yesterday, do caddies ever get replaced during the course of a tournament?
It is very, very rare. I mean, if a caddy like got hurt, injured, something like that, got very sick, food
Right.
poisoning.
Family emergency, I gotta go.
Right. It is very rare. If that happens, you sometimes have a family member of either the golfer or the caddy step up and take their place. Or you have maybe another caddy on the course says, my brother's here and he's been a caddy for forever or whatever. Usually they try to find a replacement that's somewhat on that level.
Makes sense.
Sometimes they have old caddies that they've retired and they can reach out to and say, hey, can I pull you out of retirement for one tournament?
So cool.
For one day.
Nuts. Nuts.
Or whatever. But it's very rare that it happens at this point.
I didn't know caddy was like a bloodline thing. We passed this skill down through
Well, it's
line.
like the golfers. I mean, and sometimes you have like a brother who golfs and his brother, and you have one brother that golfs, the other brother caddies.
That's true.
And in fact, this year they said is only the second ever time that they have a brother-sister pairing in the LPGA and PGA tours.
Oh.
And so, there's a brother who was playing yesterday and his sister plays on the LPGA tour.
That's cool.
So, and it's only happened a few times
Wow.
in history. But very quickly before we do go, I do want to say, after our last show, you had told me you had somebody write in and say that we keep calling things shots, but they're also strokes.
Yes. Yes.
So I just want to very quickly go over the difference between a shot and a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
There's no difference. I'm just going to say that most of the time the announcers are calling them shots.
Shots. That's all I ever heard them say, for real, about the actual.
It will say strokes on like the card.
Mm-hmm.
But mainly they call it a shot because your stroke is also the mechanics of you swinging.
Got it.
And so when they're breaking down the mechanics of your stroke, they don't want to confuse viewers with that and the number of strokes it took to get to the hole.
Makes sense. They don't want to confuse me.
Yes, they don't want to confuse viewers like Gina. Okay? So we very quickly wanted to make sure we got that out of the way.
Yes. So there's other stuff, of course, we didn't get to. And if you guys, when you watched, if you have questions, please let us know. So many ways to reach out to us. Facebook, Wait What Sports. Instagram, wait_what_sports. Gmail. Don't laugh. That took a lot.
So, I mean, we plan on doing another golf show probably over the summer for the Open, for the British Open, just known as the Open.
The Open. Different from the
and
U.S. Open, because there is a U.S. Open.
There is a U.S. Open.
Learn that.
There's also an Irish Open.
So many Opens. Okay.
But the oldest is the British Open or the Open. So we plan on having another golf show for you then.
Yes.
But until then, have a wonderful week, everybody.
Yes. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you all on the next one. Back to baseball.